boardwalk that extended down the street in front of the shops. "Let's buy cookies in there," she said, tilting her head toward the bakery. Julia released her seatbelt and reached for her small purse, slinging its shoulder strap over her head and across her chest. "Okay. Are we leaving the truck parked here?" "Yes. The house is close. We can walk." After exiting the truck, Mattie slammed the door, making her sister startle. Julia threw her an apologetic glance, and Mattie held her gaze for a moment, giving her a look that she hoped would steady her. Then Mattie turned and led the way down the boardwalk. They were both dressed in denim capris, light-colored t-shirts, and tennis shoes. Mattie considered Julia much prettier than she was, but she knew they looked enough alike that most people would guess they were sisters, or at least related. Half Caucasian and half Latina, they were both brunette, though Julia wore her hair long and in a ponytail, while Mattie's was styled in a shoulder-length bob. They both had brown eyes, tan skin, and fine features, with one difference. Mattie's nose bore a small bump on the bridge where it had been broken in a childhood fistfight, while Julia's nose was straight and narrow. A bell above the door of the panaderia jingled as they entered and stepped inside. A glass display case, half filled with cakes, cookies, and pastries, stood at the back of the room, where an arching open window afforded a view into the kitchen. A man dressed in a white shirt and pants, covered with a white apron, came through a swinging door behind the case to greet them with a friendly grin. Flour dusted one of his cheeks, and his glistening black hair was slicked back and held into place with shiny pomade. "Dios mío," he said, his brown eyes twinkling with humor. He continued speaking in Spanish. "Have I died and the heavens sent 2 angels to bring me home?" Mattie's heart sank. Last time she'd visited this panaderia, a woman had been behind the counter. The woman had seemed bored and uninterested, and Mattie had sensed that she'd been considered one of the local customers, no one special. This man seemed interested enough in them to remember them later. Still, she smiled as she replied in Spanish. "No, senor. We're on our way through town and decided to stretch our legs and browse your local shops before we drive on." "It is my good fortune to have you stop in. What would you like to eat today? Fresh rolls? Pasteles?" They selected a few of the pastries he offered and half a dozen cookies, which he placed in a waxy bag. He kept up a cheerful banter as he rang them up, flirting openly. His attention made Mattie uncomfortable, and she noticed that while Julia remained pleasant, her sister demonstrated a practiced art of diversion and made short work of their transaction. Soon they were headed down the boardwalk again, the bag of goodies in Mattie's hand. "He was nice," Julia murmured as she strolled beside Mattie. Mattie tossed a look over her shoulder to see if he'd come out of his shop to watch where they went. Maybe a little too friendly. She felt a twinge of alarm when the baker stepped out onto the boardwalk, his phone to his ear. He glanced their way, and then turned, as if looking up the street in the opposite direction. Julia seemed oblivious of the baker. Where to next? They'd come to the alley that Mattie had gone down the first time she'd been here. She turned into it, checking to see if the man noticed where they went, but he remained facing away from them. This way. Over to the next street. Despite it being November, the autumn sun warmed her tense shoulders as they made their way down the alley, crowded with garbage bins, broken wooden crates, cardboard boxes, and old discarded furniture. The backs of small shops and restaurants lined both sides, and the scent of spicy Mexican food mingled in the air with the odor of decayed rubbish. Mattie remained vigilant, but they encountered no one. At the end of the alleyway, they stepped out on a dirt street lined with adobe and clapboard houses, some with tiled roofs and others with shingles. As they passed by, hands scratched in the yards, uttering a contented, throaty murmur. Ramona's homes had a few houses down the block, and as they approached, the first thing Mattie noticed was that the flock of hens her mother had been feeding the day she'd visited appeared to be absent. And the yard isn't quite as tidy, she thought, spotting weeds growing in the beds of flowers and succulents. "Here we are," Mattie said quietly as she stopped in front of the house. Her stomach fluttered.